Alright everybody, this is Adam again with another ear stretching video. This video was originally supposed to be my victorious stretch from 2 gauge to 0 gauge. In my last video I was stretching from 4 gauge to 2 gauge with a spiral taper, and that stretch was very successful. It took me about an hour to do. If you haven't watched that video, go ahead and go back and watch that video, so I don't have to explain all this over again. But the idea for this video was going to be that this was going to be a bigger stretch. The last stretch was 1 millimeter, and this stretch from 2 gauge to 0 gauge was going to be a full 2 millimeter stretch. So the reason that's not that video is because that was a failure. I wasn't able to do it. So I was hoping that it would be super simple like the last stretch, but unfortunately it was not. And I got the taper in about halfway, only to about there. And like I said, the last one took about an hour, and after an hour it still wouldn't go any farther. And I ended up having the tapers in for about 8 hours, and my earlobe had decided it wasn't going to go any bigger than halfway. So I ended up having to have my lovely wife make me some 1 gauge plugs so that I could take the tapers out. So she made these out of polymer clay, and it was kind of an emergency. I need something for my ears, can you make me something? And she did. So so then I went to 1 gauge for a while. So it's a little harder to find 1 gauge plugs around. So if you're not sure if you're going to be able to do the full stretch, you can go 1 gauge in between 2 and 0. Just try to find some ahead of time, because they're a little harder to find. Sometimes you can get them on eBay or Amazon, but they're not as readily available in stores as 2 gauge, 0 gauge, and the more standard sizes. So unfortunately I wasn't able to do the stretch. That's not to say that you won't be able to, but take your time and just let your ear tell you what's going on. If you have to really push it, then you're going to be causing some trauma in your ear. So so in this video, it's more of the mistakes I made over the last couple of months. It's been a couple of months since my last stretch, and I was so determined to get to 0 gauge that I did start rushing a little bit. I didn't want to be in 1 gauge. I wanted to get into my awesome tunnels, and so I pushed it a little bit, and I actually had made some of these 0 gauge tunnels, some stuff I found at Hobby Lobby, and I just drilled the center out and sanded it down to where it was 0 gauge. And I was so excited about getting into the 0 gauge that I tried to get these in. After wearing 1 gauge for about 2 weeks, I was able to get the taper all the way in, up to the full 0 gauge. So I had to let my ears relax again for a couple weeks before I could get these all the way in. So then I promptly went to put these homemade wooden tunnels in, and they wouldn't go in. I don't know, something about the texture on them. They weren't smooth enough, or the edge was too rough or something, but I tried really hard for a few minutes to get them in. And I was able to get them halfway, and then had to pull them back out and try again with the taper, and basically just left my earlobes very upset, and wasn't able to get these in, and my earlobes swelled up so bad trying to do that I couldn't even get my 1 gauges back in. So I had to go back to 2 gauge for about 2 weeks, because this earlobe swelled up really huge, and it actually cut the hole a little bit. So I had to spend a lot of time healing my earlobe again because I rushed. And it's funny because I've spent all this time being very meticulous about taking my time and just really being patient, and I have had early on, I did make some mistakes, but I learned from that. Up until the point where I really, really wanted to be in zero gauge. So I rushed and hurt my lobes. So it took me almost 2 months to get my lobes to the point where I could actually get the zero gauge in after cutting this earlobe, and this one wasn't very happy either. But I went up to my wife and I said, I don't know if you can tell, but I think this earlobe's pretty swollen. And she looks up, yeah, it's pretty swollen. So it was pretty ugly, and it was red and swollen and a little bit infected, I think, just from that aggressive trying to get this tunnel in there. So at any rate, I was able to finally get the taper in again a month and a half, 2 months later, after my lobes had healed up, and I did take my time this time and really slow down and not overdo it. So then I was able to get the taper through, and then I went ahead and used these silicone double flare zero gauge because they were the easiest to get in, because I could just kind of squished it up and pop it through. And then once my lobes relaxed again, then I was able to get a standard hard tunnel in. These used to be a double flare, but in the interest of not overtaxing my ears, I sanded the back flare off, so they're just slightly double flare. So these go in a lot easier. My lobes still haven't relaxed enough to be able to put a true double flare in, and now that I've learned again how screwing my earlobes up takes a lot of time to heal, I'm taking my time and waiting for my lobe to be ready to go ahead and put that double flare in. So all that to say, my original experiment was a failure. I was unable to go from 2 gauge to 0 gauge in one stretch. That is a full 2 millimeter stretch from 6 millimeter up to 8 millimeter. As much as I wanted it to happen and as excited as I was, it wasn't going to happen, and I should have taken my time. So I do encourage you to take your time and just be patient, because if you want this to be a long-term thing, you really don't want to have a lot of scar tissue in your ears, because I have been pretty careful about preventing scar tissue, because the more scar tissue you have, the harder it is going to be stretched. So I've actually had people comment on my holes. I was in getting a CAT scan the other day, and I had to pull my plugs out. I'm not sure why, but my holes actually shrink up pretty fast, and the lady was surprised how small the holes get, even in a short amount of time. And it's just because my earlobes are still very, very elastic, and you can't feel any kind of scar tissue. There's no hard spots or lumpiness or anything in there that would indicate that the tissue has been damaged. So then I'm able to just really, really easily just put my plug back in. So the system does seem to be working when I take my time. So really, really, it's super important to keep your lobes healthy. If you want to be able to stretch really big, really take your time so that you're not creating scar tissue and hurting yourself. Because you try to get into those big sizes and your earlobes are all jacked up, it's going to be really, really hard, and it's going to be dangerous for your ears. So, I don't want to see you guys getting bad blowouts or having infections in your ears or anything funky going on. So you just take your time. Your skin will stretch and it will adapt, and it'll be easier to deal with. And I'm going to do another video probably right after this one about an essential oil blend I used when I was healing this earlobe. It's been really, really good at keeping my lobes pliable and healing up that infection. The infection cleared out in just a couple of days using that blend. So yeah, take your time, be careful, and hopefully I don't have any more issues. And I'm just one size away from my final size, my final goal size, which is 00. Everybody tells me that once I get there, I want to go bigger. But at this point, I've decided I'm going to stay in 00 for 6 months before I stretch any bigger. Um, it seems safe. So if I decide to go bigger than that after 6 months, then I'll feel comfortable doing that. But so hopefully my next stretch, I don't have any issues. But I'm going to definitely take my time and just be careful with it. So yeah, be safe with your ears, and keep checking back to my channel. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and click the subscribe, and I'm going to keep doing these videos, hopefully more frequently than I did last time. And the last time I just had so many issues with my lobes, I didn't really think you guys need to see my gross earlobes. So yeah, take your time and keep watching, and I'll try to put out some more helpful videos for you guys, and catch you around.